Welcome to Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. My name is George Ortega, and this is episode number 110, Review of Free Will Refutations. We're going to basically just go over the fundamental basic reasons why we don't have a free will, because it's good to do that. I mean, like, and this isn't going to be like a complete list. I might have left some out, but you'll see like there's a lot of ways of understanding why it's impossible for us to have a free will. All right, my co-host Enel is not here, as you can see, or as you will see. He's not going to be here next week or the week after, but he'll be back after that. Okay. All right, so here we go. We're going to start out first with some basic definitions of free will, because different philosophers, psychologists define it in different ways, thinking that if they define it in a certain way, we can have it. But as you'll see, there's refutations to whatever way they choose to define it. Okay, the first definition is the one that I generally use. It makes the most sense. It's like we would have a free will if we could choose whatever we wanted, our feelings, thoughts, whatever, independent of factors, things that are not in our control, like our unconscious, like our genes, like the way we were brought up, like what we didn't learn or learned, all these things that make us who we are and ultimately decide for us. If we didn't have those influences, we could choose completely on our own, that would be free will. Okay. Another way of defining free will that makes a lot of sense also for people who don't understand that as well, free will, if we had free will, we would be fundamentally morally responsible. That means, we would be, it would be our responsibility to do right and wrong. Now, I'll give you an example of this. Let's say, somebody, spiked my drink before I came here or something, right? And, with some kind of drug, and I went out after the show and committed a crime, and I didn't know about it, right? All right, that would be an example of, something that, it's like it goes with the first definition of control. I wouldn't be in control of what I was doing because it'd be the drug, whatever agent they gave me. But if I was in front of a court or something, they wouldn't hold me fundamentally legally responsible because something that was not in my control was making me act that way. So basically, now, all right. So because we don't really have free will, we're not fundamentally morally responsible. It's really, if we do right, good, we're lucky. If we don't, we're not as lucky, whatever. It's really not up to us. Now, all right, the caveat here is that, we still have to, quote unquote, assume assume responsibility, moral responsibility, and kind of hold others, quote unquote, responsible, just because for example, the universe makes us do right and wrong a lot of times, and we know from experience, from science, that if you have rules and you have punishments and rewards, that conditions us to do the right thing. So all right, so basically if we had a free will, we would have fundamental moral responsibility. We don't have fundamental moral responsibility because we don't have free will. What we have is pragmatic responsibility. All right, the next definition of free will that some philosophers propose, again, kind of trying to sidestep the main issue, whatever, trying to frame the issue in different words that they think would provide them free will. It's the idea that well, think about it. Could you have done otherwise than what you did? If you made a decision, could you have chosen otherwise? Okay, now, first glance, people would say, I'm going to refute this. I might as well refute these while I present them to you so you can understand them. I'll refute them again, maybe. But all right, so when you think about this, the only way you could have chosen otherwise would have been if, the universe is different. This is causality. Well, I'll have to explain this later. But yeah, so basically, essentially, you could not have chosen otherwise. You would have had to have been a different person in a different universe. The circumstances would have had to have been different for you to have chosen otherwise. And so that's the answer is no, you couldn't have. But anyway, that's one of the definitions they use. The third one is this is a really, really bogus definition. This is Spinoza got this. Jonathan Edwards, Baron de Holbach, a lot of philosophers, hundreds of years ago, several hundred years ago, understood that free will is an illusion, But then you have these philosophers like Hume and Kant who they couldn't accept this. They understood the causality. They understood that if everything has a cause, then every decision has a cause, and there's a cause to that decision, and these causes have causal antecedents. You know, there's a cause to that cause, a cause to that cause, and these causes go back to before the person was born. Clearly, free will is impossible. So what do? They changed the meaning of free will. You know, before that, you know, everybody was pretty much on board with what they meant by free will. So basically, Kant and Hume and now some other modern philosophers say that, well, free will is, we don't have complete free will, but free will is those instances where we can, like, choose what we want to choose, okay? That's how they define free will. The problem with that definition, as we'll see later, is we don't get to want, you know, our wants are not up to us. You know, like if our wants are causally determined, or if our wants come from our unconscious or from our genes and stuff, we're not in control of that. Okay, so again, it's a bogus definition, very easily refuted. All right, so let's start. Let's start with the basic fundamental reason free will is absolutely, completely, irrevocably impossible. Causality. Everything has a cause. Okay, nothing can happen without a cause. What is a cause? A cause is whatever makes something happen. If something happens, it has to have a cause. You know, if there is no cause to it, it can't happen. So what is causality? So like, let's say you make a decision. Okay, there's a cause to that decision. Some philosophers, some scientists will say, well, wait a minute. If we can't know what the causes are, you know, how can we say there are causes? But that's an absurd contention, and I'll tell you why. Because, like, naturally, when we make a decision, we can't know what the causes are because the causes are coming from our unconscious, and I'll explain that later. But there is one way we can know what the cause or causes to every decision, everything that happens on Earth is, and that is if you consider that, like, consider the entire universe. This is the best way, most fundamental, comprehensive way to understand causality. The state of the universe at one moment in time, like this moment right now, is completely causing the state of the universe at the next moment, or a few moments later, like this moment right now. Okay, so in other words, if you understand causality in terms of the state of the universe, the entire universe causing the state at the next moment, then that state causing the state of the next moment, you also understand that everything happening within each universe at a distinct state, is also causally determined by the previous states of the universe. So, like, the answer to the question, well, what is the cause of your decision? The state of the universe at the moment prior to your decision. And what's the cause of that? The state of the universe at the moment prior to that. And this state-by-state evolution, regression in this case, of the universe goes back to the Big Bang. After the Big Bang, we don't know what happened, or before that, whatever. But all right, so that's causality, you know. And might as well get into this. Like, a lot of people know causality in terms of the way that the actually free will. I don't think we're going to get to all these, but that's all right. In terms of, like, the way the free will question has been framed for hundreds of years, basically it's a question of whether it's determinism or free will. Now, what is determinism? Determinism is really a restatement of this causality that I've explained, but, like, it's explained according to the statement by this French mathematician, Pierre-Simon de Laplace, I don't know, I think it's Laplace. And he said, you know, if you had an intelligence vast enough, you know, that would know everything in the universe, for that intelligence, nothing in the future would be unknown, or the past. And you know, that's obvious, because we know that in science. If we know the conditions of something in the present, everything that's making, like for example, we know where the sun is right now, okay? We can predict exactly where the sun's going to be a year from now based on our knowledge of the sun's position and its rate of movement and all that stuff. So basically, Laplace, you know, termed this determinism, okay? Now, there was a confusion that came about in terms of, like, well, at the quantum level, we can still determine the past and the present. I mean, again, we don't know everything, so we can't determine everything. We can't predict everything. At the quantum level, we can still predict actually even more accurately than with classical mechanics, but we have to rely on both classical mechanics and probabilities. That's confused some people. And the thing is with determinism, they say, well, like, no, not everything is determined, which is what they're trying to say is not everything is caused, which is absurd. But the thing is, as I'm going to get into right now, actually, that if things aren't caused, then there's absolutely no way we could be causing them with our will, with our free will, with anything. And all right, so let's go to that. Indeterminism. Some people say, no, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, states that at the subatomic level, you can't simultaneously measure the position and momentum of a particle. Therefore, the particle's behavior is indeterministic. Hold on. All right, now, a lot of philosophers, a lot of physicists, as I just said, have been confused by this term indeterministic. What does it mean? It simply means, the way physicists use it, that you can't use standard classical mechanics to arrive at a complete prediction of quantum behavior, elementary particle behavior, particles that are tiny, tiny, tiny. Okay. But all right, so they say not everything is causal, not everything is determined. And sometimes they say that indeterminism means that it's probabilistic, but we'll get into that. Actually, my next show is about that, or actually my next point. All right. So the idea is all right, if by indeterminism they mean that that things don't happen for a cause, again, if something is happening without a cause, we cannot say that it was caused by a human being, let alone a human free will. Okay? Another synonym for indeterminism, for trying to refute determinism, causality, is to say that some things just happen randomly. Okay, now there are different uses of the word random. Sometimes, if I have a deck of cards and they pick one out at random, you're picking one out without consciously deciding which one. You're just picking out one without a thought. But the way they mean it when they try to refute determinism or causality is that, again, it's like indeterminism, that something is happening without a cause. It's impossible. Nothing happens without a cause. Everything has to be caused. And again, if our decisions were made at random, without any cause, we couldn't attribute them to the free will. All right, let's get into this issue of probabilities, because sometimes they'll say, well, not everything is determined, not everything is deterministic. Some things are indeterminate, and basically they're saying that the behavior of these particles is probabilistic. No, the behavior of these particles is not probabilistic. I'm going to get into this in 2 shows from now, but a brief explanation right now. In classical mechanics, let's say you're measuring a grapefruit. You fire a photon at the grapefruit, right? The photon is so small, it's not going to disturb the momentum of the grapefruit. In other words, it could simultaneously measure the momentum and position of this grapefruit without disturbing it in any way, right? You can't do that at the subatomic level. If you have a photon here, an electron here, and you're trying to measure the position and momentum of this electron with the photon, as soon as you fire the photon into the electron, with let's say a short wavelength, high energy particle to measure its position, what happens is you go into it and it's going to knock it into a different momentum. Momentum is direction and velocity, okay? And that's why you can't use classical mechanics. Classical mechanics, we're saying that we can use to measure a grapefruit, completely. That's why you can't use classical mechanics at the quantum level, because the measuring particle is going to interfere with the momentum of the measured particle, and it's not going to give you a simultaneous momentum position of the particle. Okay? So, what do they do at the quantum level? What happens is, all right, they can't do that with one single particle, but they can do that with a group of particles. Who knows, 100, 1,000, whatever. So what happens is they fire a photon at a group of 1,000 particles, right? And they get a determination of position and momentum that is not going to be completely accurate, because it never could be, but they get an idea of it, okay? The interference on a group is going to be much less than with one. And what happens is they'll do this hundreds, thousands of times to get a data set, okay? And once you've done this thousands of times, then based on probabilities, based on quantum mechanics, which is a measuring tool, not a description of reality, then from those probabilities, they can determine what the behavior is of any isolated single particle within that group. Okay, so the reason I say this, because like some philosophers, some psychologists who argue for free will, they'll say that fundamentally quantum mechanics says that particle behavior, behavior of elementary particles is probabilistic, that these particles are moving about in a probabilistic manner. No, we rely on probabilities to determine or measure or predict the behavior of these particles, but these particles are always behaving in a completely causal manner. In other words, there has to be causes to how they're behaving. Okay, and again, another way to understand this probabilities thing is like, if you're trying to measure, if you're trying to use quantum mechanics to predict single particle behavior at the quantum level, you have to rely on classical mechanics. You have to rely on those first 1,000 measurements of groups of particles. Okay, and that's a completely causal measurement. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is like quantum mechanics requires classical mechanics in order to work. Without the classical mechanics that gives it the data set upon which to derive the probabilities, you could not get any quantum mechanical prediction. Okay. So that's, all right, let's go. The next thing is like some philosophers, I mean, I don't get this, but they say that like, well, no, not everything has a cause. Some things are uncaused. And, there's a guy, Galen Strawson, he's a philosopher who gets that free will can't exist. He's got a refutation. He calls it the basic refutation. It makes sense. He says nothing can be causa sui. Causa sui is the cause of itself. You can't have either a decision or a human being being the cause of itself, okay? Because theoretically, maybe the eternally, mind-boggling, logic transcending beginning of everything, maybe there was a first cause, who knows? Doesn't seem like even that would be possible, but like right now, after the Big Bang, everything has to have a cause. So again, so that's, so again, for free will defenders that think that things can have a cause, that's not it. Some free will defenders will think, well, the decision just happens. Again, if it just happens, it can't be up to us anyhow. But that's kind of like in Latin have the term ex nihilo, something from nothing, something out of nothing. If our decisions are coming out of nothing, they're not coming out of our mind, out of our will, out of our free will. Okay, so we're on refutation number 5, the unconscious. Completely aside and different from this whole causal thing of why free will is impossible, we've got an unconscious. Now, what is our unconscious? We've got our conscious mind. Right now, you're conscious of listening and watching me. I'm conscious of what I'm saying and stuff. Consciousness is only awareness, okay? Our consciousness does not store information because consciousness is very momentary, very... it's changing all the time. Like right now, I'm conscious of what I'm saying right now, but I'm not conscious of what I just said, or I'm not conscious of what I'm going to say. And you're the same for you. You're conscious of what I'm saying right now. You're not conscious of what I just said 5 seconds ago, and you're not conscious of what I will say 10 seconds ago. So consciousness is only awareness. So what does that mean? That means like all of our data, all of our memories, our experiences, our learning, all that stuff is in our unconscious. Now, by definition, the unconscious is a part of our mind that we're not conscious of. That is why they call it the unconscious. Okay, Freud understood this, this is understood. This isn't controversial, okay? So anyway, so you've got all the data for our decisions in the unconscious and a part of our mind that we can't consciously access. Okay, so what happens? If all the data, when we make any kind of decision, it's got to be based on something. Why do we do this? Is it a pleasant thing to do? Is it a right thing to do? Does it make sense? All this stuff is in our unconscious. If we can't actually access the unconscious with our conscious mind, what does that tell you? That tells you the decisions are made at the unconscious level. Okay, so basically it's the unconscious, that also, all right, another thing. Right now, when you're listening and hearing me, you think that you're just listening hearing and seeing me, okay? Your unconscious is also hearing and seeing me. That's a very key point, because what happens is, actually, it's right now, it's your unconscious that's hearing and seeing me, and then it's making you aware of that. Because you know this, like, remember sometimes, like, you're reading a book, right? And you're reading these sentences, right? And you get down a couple of paragraphs, and then you realize, I don't understand, you realize you didn't understand a thing that you read. Okay, so a lot of times you could be thinking that you're seeing something where your unconscious has gone somewhere else. All right, anyway, so the idea is, because all of the data, all the memories for our decisions are in our unconscious, because we're not aware of our unconscious, it's our unconscious that is making the decisions and then making us aware of what it decides. So obviously, the unconscious is something we're not even aware of. We can't control it. If we're not aware of it, we can't control it. So obviously, it's something that is a part of us that we're not aware of and can't control, that is making the decisions for us. All right, and that's another very, very powerful reason why we don't have a free will. And I could get into it more, but we got some more stuff. I've got 15 and I've got 6 minutes. Let's see if we can go through it. Genes. Okay, genes is very basic. Genes is kind of like, it's a combination of the unconscious and causality. Genes is like 50% of our personality is genetic. Okay, the other 50% is like environmental, how we were raised and stuff. But if our genes are taking part in our decisions, and our genes are like, if our genes formed 50% of our personality, we can't control our genes. We don't decide what genes we're going to get or not. All right, so that's another refutation. I'm going to go through these quickly, because I want to see if I can get through them all. Okay, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain. We're genetically, biologically hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. That's what we do. That's human beings, that is what we do. Now, sometimes you say, we don't do that all the time. Sometimes we endure some pain. But, when we do that, like, let's say we go to battle or something. We know we may get killed, but the reason we do that is because, like, it's for a higher cause, a higher good. And basically what we're doing is we're pleasing our conscience. We get more pleasure from doing the right thing than from wimping out and not doing the right thing, whatever. Okay, so basically, and some people will say, well, no, sometimes like I purposely choose to undergo pain, so I'm not seeking pleasure. But that's not true either, because, like, let's say you run 6 miles a day, all right, and you're putting yourself for pain. Basically, you're predicting that pain is going to be offset by greater pleasure. It's going to be, in the long run, and the whole picture thing. You're going to get more pleasure by that investment in pain. Okay, so again, like, if we're hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, every decision we make is going to be based on that consideration. You can't override that. Okay, then, like, you can see our decisions in terms of the strongest motivation. I'm thinking to myself, I want to eat an apple. Do I want to eat an apple or a pear? Okay, I ate an apple yesterday, but I kind of like apples more than pears. I don't really. I think I like pears better. But anyway, you've got these two competing motivations. Should I eat the apple or should I eat the pear? One of them is going to win out. And you can't be conscious of that. You just wait for it to come to you, and so, oh, all right. So, all right, I ate the apple yesterday, but, I do like apples more than pears, so I'm going to eat the apple today also. Or, like, because I ate the apple yesterday, I'm going to eat. So again, it's the strongest of these two motivations that are conflicting with each other. Okay. Some people say, no, another one is that, like, think about this. Thoughts just pop into our minds. They just pop into our mind. Think of what you're thinking while you're hearing me and seeing me say this stuff. These thoughts are just popping into your mind, and just, you go through the day like that. Okay, now there's some, you could say to yourself, well, right now I'm going to think banana, continuously. I'm going to think the word banana, like, but even when you try to do that, think banana for like 30 seconds. I guarantee you other thoughts are going to just pop into your mind. And that's what happens. Thoughts just pop into our minds. Okay. Some people say we have a partial free will, that we can choose freely sometimes, but not other times. All right, think about it. Just the unconscious. What I said about the unconscious never sleeps. The unconscious is awake 24 hours a day, and it has all the data. So you can't freely choose sometimes or other times. Another refutation to that is that, like, let's say half the time you're choosing freely, other time, like, whatever. So, like, with that half that you think you're choosing freely, those decisions are going to have causes. And again, you're back up against this state-by-state evolution of the universe, cause by cause, regressing back to the Big Bang. Okay. God's omnipotence. Okay, for those of us who are religious, I'm religious, I tend to equate God with the universe. If God is all powerful, God's will goes. That, end of the story. God, because I'm running out of time. God's omniscience. If God knows everything, as we tend to believe that God knows everything, God has to know everything. God is everything. God controls everything. So if God knows everything, he's going to know a million years before you do anything what you were going to do a million years, hence whatever after that. And so if he knew a million years ago what you're doing right now or today or whatever, there's absolutely no way that you could do anything other than what he knew you were going to do. Okay, so that's another way of telling you. Okay, another thing, basically fundamental. We didn't create ourselves. If you created a robot, if you were this mad scientist, created a robot, and let's say you could give it free will. You can't, but he goes out, commits crimes. You're in front of a judge. What are you going to tell the judge? Well, you can't blame me. You've got to blame the robot because, I gave the robot free will. The judge can say, I'm sorry, you made the robot, you created him, you're responsible for the damage. Same thing with us. I mean, we credit God for the good we do. We blame God for whatever. God created us. We didn't create ourselves. So if he would have created us perfect, we would have been perfect. Okay, nature and nurture. Okay, that's another thing about the conditioning, that, our environment and our genetics condition us to do what we do. And finally, experience, because I'm running out of time, I've got 30 seconds. If we had free wills, we would be blissed out every moment of every day, and we'd be completely good all the time. Okay, well, we've got 30 seconds, and I think you can understand how free will can be refuted very easily in a lot of different ways. And the reason we still have it is because we're compelled. It's not in our choice. The universe, for whatever reason, wants most of us to still continue that we have a free will, but that's changing. All right, thanks for watching. In the future, we're going to talk about this a lot more. Check out the website, Exploring the Illusion of Free Will, and we've got 2 TV shows. All right, we'll see you next week here on Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. Thanks.